Hello, and welcome to the Between the Lines podcast. My name is Janine. I'm a clerk at the Winkler branch of South Central Regional Library.
And I'm Jess. I'm the branch administrator of the Winkler Library. So, in this podcast, what we do is, each book we break it up into two parts. The first part, we read the first half of the book, judge the cover, discuss why we chose the book that we did, and any predictions we have for the next half of the book. And then the second part, we, of course, read the second half of the book and discuss how we liked it, if we thought that it changed too much, too little. So basically, our reasoning for doing this is, I don't know about you guys, I sometimes like the book a lot less by the time I finished it, as opposed to halfway through. Or you like the book a lot more. The ending makes a lot of difference in terms of your final impressions of the book. So we thought it'd be interesting to get our impressions halfway through. There will be spoilers. We'd like to remind you that we are very opinionated, but all our opinions are just opinions. If you like the book and we don't like the book, totally fine. Vice versa. If we like the book and you think it's awful, by all means, comment, let us know. But it is all just opinion-based, and it's all good fun. And with that, we get into the book.
Hello, and welcome to the Between the Lines podcast. My name is Janine.
I'm Jess. Janine, do you want to take us through the book that we chose for this week and the general synopsis?
Yes, so in honor of Halloween coming up, we chose a horror, Stephen King. We chose Sleeping Beauties, which was written by Stephen King and his son Owen King. And so here is the synopsis of the book. In a future so real and near it might be now, something happens when women go to sleep. They become shrouded in a cocoon-like gauze. If they are awakened, if the gauze wrapping their bodies is disturbed or violated, the women become feral and spectacularly violent. And while they sleep, they go to another place, a better place, where harmony prevails and conflict is rare. One woman, the mysterious Eve Black, is immune to the blessing or curse of the sleeping disease. Is Eve a medical anomaly to be studied, or is she a demon who must be slain? Abandoned, left to their increasingly primal urges, the men divide into warring factions. Some wanted to kill Eve, some to save her. Others exploit the chaos to wreak their own vengeance on new enemies. All turn to violence in a suddenly all-male world, set in a small Appalachian town whose primary employer is a women's prison. Sleeping Beauties is a wildly provocative, gloriously dramatic father-son collaboration that feels particularly urgent and relevant today.
Particularly urgent? I mean, I don't think I'm going to fall asleep anytime soon. That being said, I did have a difficult time staying awake during this book.
For me, I was getting a little bit pandemic-y vibes.
A little bit,
in terms of, like, the panic and hysteria,
mm-hmm.
the looting and all of that. But, yeah, so I think partly no, that's not true. I have read Stephen King before, but I have never read one of his horror books before. So
you're one up on me. I've never read any Stephen King book.
I read the JFK one, which I really did enjoy. It was very interesting because it talks about like time traveling and what happens if something in the past would change even just a little bit what happens in the future. And it just, to me, it was interesting to think about that. But
that is not this book.
That is not this book. I'm very apprehensive about starting this book because they generally do not like horror. If I see something labeled as horror, I usually stay away. So, yeah.
I don't have a problem with horror, providing it's smart horror.
Mm-hmm.
I have no use for teenagers running through the woods being chased by a man with a chainsaw. I have various criticisms of that, which I will not get into because, I mean, this is a podcast for a library and it is sort of intended to be listened to by everybody, and we don't want to get too terribly graphic. But suffice it to say, it's not exactly realistic. Smart horror, on the other hand, where there's some thought and it's more psychological rather than anything else, that I prefer. And I don't mind that. I mean, just under halfway through the book, I would not classify this as horror yet. I don't know that I'd even classify it as a thriller.
I wouldn't say thriller. I read a lot of thrillers. I love thrillers. So don't ask me why I don't like horror, but I think horror just is one step further, right? Mm-hmm. And I just am definitely creeped out by what is happening in this book.
Really?
A little bit. Mm. It's gross.
I mean, do I want this to happen to me? No, definitely not.
No.
I don't know. So far, I have no ick or creep factor.
No?
Like, at all.
Not even with, like, the moths everywhere. Like, that's the part that I don't like, the moths everywhere. And the fox.
See, my problem
The
with
fox.
moths.
Gross.
What? I don't have an issue with the fox. I'm slightly confused by why there's all of a sudden a fox.
Yes,
but
also that.
But no, like, the moths, I mean, it could partially be because in my head, you know, like the cartoon where there's, like, stars going around your head?
Mm-hmm.
I just imagine the moths doing that.
Okay.
And then, I forget, it's like The Simpsons or something, but there's one where there's, like, hot dogs going around their head. So, I don't know if it's just because...
That would be less creepy than moths.
See?
For sure. But...
So, I just imagine the moths doing that. And, I don't know, it doesn't bother me. I'm not a huge fan of moths. If they're in my house, I prefer they be dead. But, I don't know, so far to me, the moths haven't really done anything creepy. They're just kind of there.
So yesterday, I was at my parents' house, and I was standing in their entrance. I was going to leave. So we had the light on, and they have a window in their door. So I opened the door. A swarm of bugs came at me, and it reminded me of this book. Because there was all these bugs on the door, so as soon as I opened the door, they just all, like... And so I had to very abruptly leave, so I didn't let all these bugs in their house. But it was like... Oh my gosh, it's the moths! They're coming for me!
That's the thing, like, when you get that swarm of bugs by the porch light kind of thing, that I'm not a fan of. Like, I don't like bugs in my mouth.
No, that's correct.
Not. But, like, these bugs aren't even doing that, or these moths aren't even doing that, they're kind of just fluttering around.
There is one part where they kind of swarm at one of the inmates in the prison.
Yeah, but nothing to the point where I'm going, ew, gross!
My ick factor is a little lower than yours.
Must be.
So,
I don't know. It's honestly, I had high hopes for my first Stephen King because I've heard my entire life, oh, Stephen King, horror, you know, you'll be so scared. And I fell asleep multiple times during this book.
Maybe it gets better. I mean, more scary in the second half.
I hope so.
Well,
I mean, I might just be bloodthirsty. I don't know. But
don't let Gail hear you say that.
True. Gail's the branch administrator in Morden.
She loves Stephen King.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, to me, the first half of the book, I'm like, okay, when do we actually get to something here?
Yeah. For me, it's not so much that it's horror. It just feels a little creepy. It's just not, I don't know. It's not what I would normally read and find interesting either. But, having said that, we should go back and talk about our first impression.
First impression's right, yes.
One thing I wrote down was, this book is too heavy.
I'm smart. I got the ebook version.
I know. It's over 700 pages, so it is a long book. Mm-hmm. When I was looking at reading half of the book, and half was 358 pages, I was like, that's a whole book.
It is.
You know? So I was like, oh, crap, I gotta read all this.
Well,
yeah. You gotta read a whole book.
Quite long, but at the same time, like, I read our previous book, In Defense of Witches.
Yes.
And that took me about the same amount of time as it took me to read Sleeping Beauties, which is it's pretty close to the same amount of pages for the first half. Mm-hmm. So, for being quite long, it reads fairly quickly, I find.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is comparing it to a rather dense nonfiction book.
Yeah.
I don't know. Honestly, in terms of first impressions, setting the cover aside for a minute, because we'll get to that, you open the book, and there is how many pages of character lists?
4, I think.
4 pages of characters.
Yeah. So
my initial impression of the book was, oh my word, I'm going to be so lost.
I know. I felt like that does not feel like a good sign.
Yeah. Honestly, it's not a problem.
It's not. Although, some of the characters do have names that are similar.
Yeah.
Or like similar letters or sounds.
To be fair, I find that to be an issue in a book where there's 2 characters and they both have a name that starts with R.
But also I found, so this is getting into more of the reading, but I feel like he jumps around a lot.
He does.
And so I mean,
he jumps right into a bit about a fox where I'm going, I don't know why there's a fox.
Yeah, and so he has chapters, and each chapter is like 5 or 6 chapters within the chapter.
Yeah, sub-chapters.
Yeah, and so each sub-chapter could be about a completely different character in a completely different place.
Generally
so now we're at the doctor's house, and now we're at the prison, and now we're at a crime scene, and now... So sometimes I'm finding, like, when I'm reading, I have to...
almost go back to the beginning of that little mini chapter.
Sort of like, okay, now we're over here. Okay, and now we're over here. Like, it just takes me a bit. And I'm normally a fairly fast reader, but it's taking me a long time to get through this because I don't know if that's part of it or if it's just the content is just I'm not quite sure why it's taking me so long, but
I don't know. I found his writing style not to be to my taste.
yeah.
It's not bad. I have read worse.
Yeah.
But, like, one of my first comments was, less brackets, please, because there's so many brackets.
Yes.
Can we have 5 seconds without putting something in parentheses? Like,
Yes.
come on.
I mean, I do that a lot when I write, but I do that in emails to people, and I do it, like, kind of jokingly.
There's a time and a place for it.
Yeah.
I'd argue it's not throughout an entire book.
No, and I agree with you about the writing style. There's something about it that
It's not bad, it's just a hair off.
and could it be because this is a book that he wrote with his son?
I'm wondering if
Is
that is what it is.
I wonder if we read just Stephen King
Mm-hmm.
by himself, if it would be different.
That's the thing. The first James Patterson we read, it was with somebody else, so we didn't like it.
Yeah.
The first Stephen King we read was with somebody else. Maybe we just need to... I don't know. We were looking at the various Stephen King books, and this was the one that intrigued me the most.
Yeah. He has a few others, like, I have checked out his books from the library, like, multiple times, and then I always return them.
Well, they are a commitment.
Yes, they are. And one time I started one and I read, like, the first few pages, and I was like, nope, I can't. Just because, I don't know, I just wasn't in the mood. I'm a bit of a mood reader also. And so I think that may be part of it, is that these are books that I have to read. And it's not that I don't want to read them, but it's not like, oh, I'm in the mood to read.
But it's not like, oh my word, I cannot wait to read this book.
Yeah, it's like...
Aurora Rising.
Yeah, but even that one, just to start it, was like, oh, I have to... As soon as you tell me I have to read it, it loses a little bit of its appeal.
Exactly. Now it's assigned reading.
Yeah. Yep. You know, and everybody thinks, oh, reading, you know, you get to read for your job. That's fantastic. That's so much fun. And, I mean, we are reading for our job, but it's
not at work.
When it's... Now you have to read this book. Well...
And the fact that you have to read it, and you have to analyze as you're reading.
Yeah.
Like, you have to make some notes and that kind of thing.
And they do have to, you have to think about it a little bit more in terms of, like, what am I going to say about this book? And I can't just, like, skim it, like, sometimes.
No, like, you have your light and fluffy books where you're kind of going, it's, you know, I'll read it, I might enjoy it in the moment, but I don't have to remember anything about this book.
Or, like, this is a book I know I'm going to love, and I just sit down and, like,
yeah, exactly,
power through it, right? Because it's really excellent.
Yeah.
But this one is, I'm not sure yet. I'm not sold. And
so far, I have not been scared once, and I'm disappointed by it.
I'm not scared. I'm more ew than scared.
I haven't even been icked out by anything. I'm disappointed, honestly. That's my main reaction from this book. I'm just kind of going, I was promised terror and screaming. I read this book in an apartment by myself. I started it at about 9 o'clock last night, and I read till about 2 in the morning. And at no point was I ever hiding under the covers with a flashlight. At no point, I don't know. I'm hoping this book is separated into part 1 and part 2.
Yeah.
I am hoping that part 2 is terrifying.
Yes.
Because so far I am disappointed in terms of it's not deserving of the horror sticker that's on it.
No, I definitely wouldn't classify it as horror at this point. So I'm just curious where he's going to go with this. Because...
Well, according to the synopsis, the men divide into warring factions, which I think would be very interesting. I'm now just envisioning like a Hunger Games scenario.
Maybe. But I also, like, the thing that I kept thinking about while I was reading this is why women in particular?
I want to know why the purpose / source of this sleeping sickness.
Yeah,
sleeping sickness, I guess that's what they call it.
I think they call it, like, the Aurora flu or something like that. Like for Sleeping Beauty.
The Aurora virus?
Maybe the Aurora virus.
Could be.
But they use the word Aurora for Sleeping Beauty. But, like, I'm just, maybe because of reading In Defense of Witches, I have feminism on the brain. Like, is he trying to make a point about women or men? Or is there, like, some deeper meaning to the fact that it's women who are suffering from this sickness?
Yeah.
Or is it just...
I don't know. That's one of the things in the synopsis that intrigued me. Where is it here? Abandoned and left to their increasingly primal urges, the men divide into warring factions. I mean, that's quite the interesting take. The thought that if women weren't around, men would basically become animals, because I don't think that's fair to them.
No.
Like, but But I'm interested to see where he goes with it.
Yeah, like where is he taking this? And why is there something deeper? Because it's women.
That's the thing. Like, I've never read a Stephen King book before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how he ends his books. Does he end with everybody's dead? We move on. We're a new species now. Or does he wrap everything up and there's a happy ending for some characters? Is it Fox is the only one left? I'm kind of voting for that ending.
I don't like the Fox.
I like the Fox. He's a bit random, but he's...
But I have read the ending of a Stephen King book. So for a school assignment, I had to read first chapter, middle chapter, last chapter. Mm-hmm. And I had to do horror, so I chose Stephen King. The last chapter was probably the most horror-y of what I read. The first chapter and middle chapter were very like, well, this is not so bad. It was Pet Sematary.
Okay.
And so to me, I always thought that was a really creepy, from what I knew of it, was creepy. The ending, to me, was a little bit, again, you might think it was totally fine. Clearly, we don't agree on what's icky and what's not. But
I don't know. I've read true crime and, heck, just standard mystery books. I've read a Christian fiction book that had more horror than this.
What kind of Christian fiction are you reading?
Abomination by Colin Coble.
Oh, yeah, I read that one too.
Yeah, that one has more horror so far than this one.
I don't remember that one being very horrific.
Let's just say body part removal was included and leave it at that.
Oh, yeah. It almost made me snort water in my nose.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I tapped it in, so it's all good.
But so far for horror, I'm unimpressed. Am I enjoying it? Yeah. As a mystery, as kind of a, frankly, more fantasy or sci-fi rather than horror.
That's what I would say at this point.
It does remind me in a lot of ways of the Illuminae Files.
Okay.
The first book, which again, we really need to do on this podcast.
They grow cocoons on their faces
They do grow cocoons on their faces. I don't know what it is, but something about the vibe. I don't know if it's the way it's written or what. It reminds me of that because again, it's kind of there's a virus that it doesn't target specific people, but it kind of goes throughout the populations.
Well, and that's the thing about this too is maybe the reason why I'm not loving it or whatever is because it's too close to the pandemic and it's like
flashbacks.
Yeah, and this book was written before, like a few years before the pandemic. I think 2017 was maybe when it came out.
I said 2017, 2018. I forget off the top of my head.
Stamp in here says 2017 is when we got it. So yeah, it's just interesting. Obviously, the sickness is different, and the world is not going as crazy as is what is happening in this book, but.
Yeah,
it was still a lot of mass hysteria and like, oh, we gotta go stock up on everything and like.
Well, not everything. They stocked up on any kind of anti-sleep aid.
Yeah.
Like coffee, energy drinks, cocaine, just drugs in general.
The police chief and her staff were raiding the drug lockup from all the drugs that they had seized.
Their
which I thought
locker for cocaine.
Which I thought was sort of funny, and then her husband comes and she's like high as a kite.
But it's that desperation not to fall asleep, which I've got to tell you, if you're reading this book, do not do it in the evening because, my word, after a long day, reading a book where every single character is desperately trying not to fall asleep just makes me want to take a nap.
It makes you want to fall asleep. And, like, some of the characters, and part of me feels like, too, well, I could just go to sleep. And they don't die. They're still alive. It just sounds peaceful.
That's
a little bit. Like that part of it.
Women, there's nothing other than the fact they don't have any idea why or how to fix it or anything like that. They just fall asleep and then the cocoon covers their face. They're not violent. The few interactions there's been where they have from the women who have already fallen asleep in whatever the other place is called, which don't know yet. It's been fairly peaceful. They're just kind of hanging out.
Yeah.
And they're like, do you want to go to the tree? Oh, yeah, sure, cool.
You don't see a lot of that at this point in the book.
Where
they're alternate reality.
To that point.
Yeah. So, but the thought of just lying there and going to sleep.
It's just going to take a nap.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Nobody's going to bother me.
Fairly peaceful. The only time it gets violent is if you try to wake the women up, which, I mean, I gotta say, parallels real life, because don't wake me up. I am not a morning person. I do not like being woken up. Don't do it.
Same.
Yeah, same.
I'm not going to bite your nose off.
But I'm not going to be happy about it.
No. But I'm not going to go all postal like these ladies are.
But that's the thing, too. Like, the women only get violent if they are woken up. And even then, from what I can tell, the violence is only towards men, not other women that might still be awake.
And there's also the one who, her son, she had her baby son with her, and she was, like, conscious enough to take him to her neighbors.
That's the thing. The maternal instinct kicks in. And any baby, like, the baby girl, like, this affects all ages. The baby girls just fall asleep, but the infant sons, their mothers, basically in a zombie-like state, either, take them out of their house, and they leave them on the driveway, or they bring them to their nearest neighbor, or somebody, but they have the presence of mind. I mean, this is after they've already been asleep, cocooned, there we go. After they've already been cocooned, they are taking their male children and finding care for them, or at least removing them from their presence so that the parents are not a danger to their children.
Yeah, like that. They still have, like you say, that maternal instinct.
Exactly.
And
which I found quite interesting and quite, I don't know if I want to say refreshing, because there's some, I don't know, it's one of those things where it seems like shock value, where in other thrillers, that kind of thing, if you really want to elicit emotion from your audience, you have a parent attack a child. And it was quite refreshing that in a book where they could so easily have gone that route.
Yeah.
And frankly, I was expecting them to go that route, that they didn't.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That was nice.
It was, and I found that part really interesting too, that they would just, subconsciously they knew they couldn't care for their child. And so they just took them away.
Or that they were a harm to their child and just removed them from their presence.
The other interesting thing is that after they get woken up and then they go all crazy, eventually they fall asleep again.
That's the thing.
They don't just
go on a murderous rampage.
Which I thought was really interesting also.
If they can be, I don't want to say calmed down, because, boy, that sounds patronising. If either the danger that they perceive is removed, or they can be restrained, they just fall back asleep.
Yeah. But it also seems like once they get that initial rage out of their system, then
they go back to sleep until they try and take the cocoon off their face again.
So the other part that I thought was really interesting was the 4 older ladies in the book club, and they decided as a group to take something to help them sleep, and they all fell asleep together because I guess they sort of thought this is going to happen anyways. We might as well.
Well, that's the thing. There was a couple cases where the women, rather than fighting it to the bitter end and then accidentally falling asleep in a car or in a place where they or their loved ones weren't safe, they took it upon themselves to essentially pick a spot and fall asleep, which I found quite interesting.
Yeah. There's definitely a few parts of the storyline that I'm not quite sure where he's going with it yet. But
oh, definitely.
So, yeah.
One of the characters were most okay. Not sure where you're headed with this. Is Frank, the animal control officer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Not a favorite.
No. Also the newscaster lady.
The newscaster lady... Isn't she asleep now?
No.
She
ran over some guy's motorcycle in a McDonald's parking lot.
As we do.
Yeah.
No, I think... No, what I'm thinking is she's on her way. She told her mother that she couldn't do it anymore. I was coming to visit her before she fell asleep.
Yeah, she was reporting, although her mother's now asleep.
Yes.
Right, because her mother's the warden.
Her mother's the warden of the prison.
Yeah.
No, I found it quite interesting that the way they're going about some of the stuff, because it's not a random virus.
No. It's
fairly short term, if that makes sense. Like, it's not, we know you're going to get this virus in a week or 2 or a month or 2. No, it's within 48 hours, because you're limited as how long you can stay awake for.
Yeah.
But because you do have some control over when you fall asleep, and if you have enough cocaine to keep you awake, how people are dealing with it, I'm finding quite interesting, because you have the ones that are kind of fighting it to the bitter end. You got the ones that are kind of making sure that they and their family are as protected from each other as possible, and you got the little ladies that are just going, we'll have some biscuits and then take a nap.
Yeah, let's take some benzos and go to sleep.
Exactly.
But
how different people are approaching this.
Yeah. The thing that I'm curious about is if there is an end to the sickness, or where that part of it is going, like how they're going to come out of this. And
no, it's just an all-male society.
Are all the women going to die, or are they going to wake up? And what's going to be left of their world when they wake up?
And what are the long-term ramifications of it?
Yeah.
That's the thing. I'm interested more from a medical perspective than I am from a, mystery horror perspective.
Yeah. Although I don't think this book is going to get overly medical.
I very much did. There was a couple parts with, like, the not even gory parts, because, my word, it's not even. Where I gotta say, considering the fact he's a horror writer, I expected Stephen King, in writing a gory scene, to be able to creep me out, or have some sort of ick factor. But there was one, I forget what was happening, but he compared it to, like, a gas station sponge. Where I'm like, great, that took me right out of it. This other part where I could have kind of gone, oh, yeah, that's a bit weird. It's like, oh, gas station sponge. What? What are you talking about? It more confused me than disgusted me.
True.
And that's the part where I'm kind of going, considering you were one of the horror writers of our time.
Mm-hmm. Maybe, actually, Owen King just wrote it on his own and put Stephen King's name on it.
It does. Can you sign this for me?
To help it sell books.
Yeah.
Although, apparently, I think Stephen King was on the CBC program Q. I don't know if you're familiar with that show. It's
part of it.
Like, they talk about pop culture and whatever. And so that's where this book was actually first mentioned, was when he was on that show. So I think that was like a year or two before it came out even. So I don't know. Like, it's hard to know. Like, most of the books that we have talked about on this podcast so far have been written by two people.
Exactly.
And
we
so
need to stop doing that.
It's hard to know. I think our next few are okay. They're not. They're single authors.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
I think their next couple coming up are single authors. But it's hard to know because neither of us is really familiar with Stephen King.
No, that's the thing.
So how much of this is Owen King and how much is Stephen King? Like, when I was doing a bit of background research, Owen King has written short stories and he's written a novel. He hasn't written a ton yet, and like, I think his book of short stories was like people liked it, whatever, but his novel was kind of panned. Like, I don't know that it did very well.
Well, that's kind of always the thing where you never totally know with the children of famous people, whether that be music, acting, writing, if they are getting their work published because it's good or because of the name recognition.
Yeah. And just because your parent is a good author does not necessarily mean you will be a good author.
No, definitely not.
So it's hard to know how much of this. I guess in the future we'll have to do another Stephen King.
Yeah. It is always one of those things where it's kind of, oh, your father was a writer. You must be a good writer too.
Yeah.
You don't do that. Somebody's like, oh, your father's a mechanic. You must be a good mechanic too. Not how it works.
My father was a farmer. I must be good with plants. Nope.
Not at all.
I kill everything. So, you can't just say because of this.
Yeah, no, that's not the way anything works.
So, I'm just very curious to see what comes up next with this one.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking forward to finishing it.
Yeah.
I want to know what happens in part 2, because I suspect in part 2 we'll probably get to a bit more horror-y.
I hope. I mean, I don't hope, but for the sake of the book, yes. For the sake of the horror classification.
For the sake of horror classification, we need to make it earn that sticker.
Otherwise, I'm going to rip it right off.
Well, I've decided this doesn't deserve this. Sticker's a badge of honor.
Put a big X over it.
Sarcastic. No. Probably shouldn't be adding those stickers. The first part felt like a very, very long introduction into an actual horror book.
Yeah.
That's sort of my impression of the first section overall.
Yeah. And we're halfway through the book, and 24 hours hasn't even passed.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's very slow moving.
Books like that, I lose a little bit of patience with, unless they're pacing is fast. But this one, it jumps around a lot, and there's so many different storylines happening.
Well, the thing that got me too was while so-and-so was at the prison, Frank was doing this. While Frank was doing this, the fox was running around. Like, we're kind of assuming that this is happening, if not sequentially, at the same time. Yeah. You don't need to say it every time.
Yeah.
Like, we got it.
Mm-hmm. We know these things are happening simultaneously. They have to be, or else this day is like 1,500 hours long.
Exactly.
So,
psych, it's a time machine.
Oh, you figured out the plot twist. Mm-hmm. I would love for there to be like an exciting plot twist.
I hope so.
I'm a little skeptical that will actually happen, but
I don't know. Right now, I'm kind of like, oh, her name is Eve, and there's a tree. Oh, look, there's a snake in the tree.
Yes. Yep.
My.
Yeah. So
It's not exactly original.
I have a lot of questions.
I do.
Well, one big question. Why is it women?
Why is it women? And if it's intentional, why? Yeah. And if it's not intentional, how? Because these cocoons are like coming out of their ears and whatnot. And it's like mucus and earwax and a protein.
Yeah, see, that grosses me out. Like, I don't want an earwax cocoon over my face. Ugh. And why would you touch that? Like, if there's something gross growing on your face, I'm sorry, I'm not touching it.
If I told you there's something on your face right now, first thing you do is try and brush it away.
Okay, that's on my own face, right? But, like, if you have something randomly weird coming out of your face...
You're just going to leave it for an entire day so I walk around like that?
And if I can see that... No, if you're sleeping, if this thing is covering your face and you're sleeping, I'm not touching that.
No.
I don't know what that is.
Well, see, that's the thing, where there's people just, like, ripping this stuff off. And if you had something on your face, like this, which is, it's not tiny.
No.
It's not,
it's not subtle.
It's not an eyelash on your face.
No.
I would not be just going, hey, look, a medical thing, let me just get rid of that for you.
Yeah, no.
Like, from a medical point of view, I'm kind of like, I don't touch that.
No.
A, I don't know what it is. B, try and remove it. It may harm you. C, it may harm me.
Yeah. Like, maybe if I had a
D where you harm me.
A 10-foot pole, and I could, like,
just poke at it.
Then maybe, and then if you did...
Hey, you should be the pricker from In Defense of Witches.
The witch pricker. But, like, maybe then if you get violent, I can at least have my pole to defend myself.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know. Yeah, it's very interesting.
It is.
I know it's not as horror-y as you expect, but it seems to me like you're still...
I
like,
just
you're not
expect a
hating
Stephen
it.
King book not to put me to sleep, and it's actively putting me to sleep.
Well, but you were reading it, like, in the middle of the night.
I start falling asleep around 11.
So...
I'm normally up till about 1 in the morning. Thus, I can only conclude that the only difference between yesterday and a regular day for me was the fact that I was reading a Stephen King book, which put me to sleep at 11.
Well, In Defense of Witches put me to sleep at 11 a.m.
True.
There's also that.
Oh.
This one put me to sleep at like 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But then I was tired.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Any final thoughts? My only other note that I have here is we don't need brand names for everything.
Yeah.
Because it's just brand names. I'm like, did they get sponsorship deals or something here?
Must. And also I'm going to build some serious muscle by holding this book.
Yes. I'm not. I'm going to be weak and flimsy by the end of it. Not an ebook.
Fight off all the violent cocooned women.
I've just got a mental image of you being attacked by nuns now for some reason.
Nuns? Why nuns?
I watched the latest Despicable Me movie where there's nunchucks. There's like a nun that's a super villain.
Oh, yes. Yes. I enjoyed that movie, actually.
I didn't mind it. If there was a Minions book, we could do a Minions to film
page to screen
thing, yeah. But anyway, we are looking forward to reading the second part of the book, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it doesn't put us to sleep this time.
Yes.
Alright, see you in part 3. Bye!
And we're back to discuss the second half of Sleeping Beauties. So, Jess, you want to share some thoughts?
I fell asleep. Again.
It goes with the theme of the book.
Yep. I don't know. It was interesting, but I am not a fan of the writing style. I don't know if it's because it was written with his son, and that affected it, or if it's just the way he writes, because I've never read a different Stephen King book. But I didn't like the writing style.
Mm-hmm.
It just bounced around too much.
I would agree with that. And I have read another Stephen King book, and I liked it much, much better than this one. So, whether that's the son's influence or not, I don't know. But
yeah, I don't know if it's just one of those, this is how we're going to work it out because it's a partnership co-writing thing, or if it's the son's writing style. That could be.
This book also had 50 million characters in it.
Yes, and I was getting annoyed with that.
Yeah, it was too much. I also felt like their editor needs to learn how to edit.
Oh, yes. I would argue this book could do with about 100 pages less.
At least.
Like, there's a lot of stuff where I'm kind of going, he's driving around in his truck. Nothing happens. We don't care. Stop it now.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. In regards to characters and stuff like that, one of the notes that I actually have is there's so many characters that you don't... You're so busy trying to keep track of who's who that you don't ever actually click or identify with or really get involved in any one character's story.
Yep, that's true. There was too many, and two of the main female characters both had, or maybe even three, had names that started with L. So if you're going to have a lot of characters, there was the sheriff...
Lila.
And the warden from the prison was also... Oh, no, she was Janice. I thought she was an L name, too.
No.
But then there was Linny. Yeah,
Linny,
she was
right.
the dispatcher. And there was, like...
I felt bad for her.
Yeah. I know, she got blown to bits. Sorry. That's not funny. But,
no, but she stayed awake for so long, and she was doing so good. And then just kind of out of the blue, random, it was kind of like, okay, well, we're just going to kill her off.
Yeah. And then there was Mary and Molly and Jeanette and Janice.
I kept getting Mary and Molly confused.
And then there was a Billy Weddermore and a Barry Holden and like...
And the Billy and the Barry, I kept getting confused.
Yes. And I'm like, who is this again? What's... Like, there's too many. Like, when you start the book off with 4 pages of characters, that's too much.
The first half I was doing okay, I think.
I don't know why the second half felt so much...
The second half felt way more, like, chaotic.
I think because they were telling the women's side and the men's side at the same time.
Yeah, that could be it.
The women were in their place, and the men were in the world. And so, like, in the first half, there was the women who, like, the women were there, but they weren't, like, a lot of them were going to sleep. And the ones that weren't, I don't know, it just felt...
I think it's too partially, because in the first half, there's a lot of introductory characters, but that is kind of like, that over there is Billy. We're going to talk about him later, but nothing ever really happens.
Yeah.
Whereas the second half, all of your secondary characters kind of come into play, and then you're going, is Billy the insurance man, or is he the guard, or is he the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Because, yeah, they maybe were mentioned in the first half, but they, in the second half, really came into the story, and...
And then there's a couple new guys added yet, where I'm going, what the heck, all of a sudden we've got some kind of demolitions expert here, like...
Yeah. And then, like, in the first half, they talked about... Was it the Griner brothers? And
but they never really explained them. They were just kind of there.
They were kind of there, but then in the second half they came in, and I'm like, this is a whole storyline we could have just left out.
We don't need them here.
Yeah. And
that's the thing, too. Like, for the longest time on the Griner brothers, those were the guys that were killed in the trailer with the meth lab, right?
No.
No, they're not.
They weren't.
But they both showed up for such short periods of time where I'm like, I don't... Kind of popped in, popped out, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just mentally associating the two together, because criminals, brothers.
Well, and I kind of wonder if it was supposed to be chaos in the second half, right? Because
but it wasn't good chaos.
No, it was hard to read chaos.
It was hard to read chaos. It was writing chaos, but it wasn't story chaos.
Yeah. To me, I found it really interesting how the differences between the men and the women. Like, the women got to their place, and they developed, like, they worked together to improve things and build their society, right? They didn't know how long they were going to be there. And the men just went into chaos. You're disagreeing with me. I can see it on your face. With you. But I also thought it was interesting that where they woke up basically in the places where they had gone to sleep. But when they woke up, everything looked different. Yeah. And the place that they woke up was the place that the men had created. I don't know if you got that, but like... The bulldozer was still there at the prison, it talked about. And like, with the RV.
You mean that way, yeah.
Yeah, so like all the chaos that the men had created, and the battles and the blowing up things and whatever.
It's basically like they took where the men were at, got rid of all the men, gave it a year or two for everything to kind of overgrow.
Yeah,
and then plunked the women
that's where the women ended up. And I thought that was really interesting that they didn't know that that's where they were waking up. Like that.
Yeah, no.
They didn't know that all of this stuff had happened while they were asleep. Or was happening simultaneously, actually.
Well, some of them. Because the thing is, as some of the women holding out and staying awake longer started to fall asleep, they'd show up in this other place. Did they just call it the other place? No, they called it our place. Right. They showed up in our place and kind of updated the existing residents on kind of like, oh yeah, they're burning us now. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they kind of got news updates and that sort of.
That's true. But the final, like, whatever battle that happened at the prison between the men, I don't think Oh, no, the girl who was the news reporter.
Michaela?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's
either Michelle or Michaela.
She came at the very end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she stayed awake, didn't she? But she went through the tree.
She did at the very end.
Right.
But she was able to stay awake because Evie gave her a magical kiss.
Yes.
To keep her awake.
Which, I'm like, are you kidding me? It's such a sad and overused plot device.
Well, the book is called Sleeping Beauties.
I know.
I kind of had to see that coming, don't you think?
I did. That's the problem with this book. I'm like, this is very predictable.
Yeah.
Like, I was expecting a few twists or turns.
Yeah, it didn't really...
As soon as the fox showed up and started going through a tree, I'm like, okay, well, I know where this is going now.
Yeah.
And, well, as soon as the fox showed up, period. And, like, Evie. Painfully obvious. The whole women will have to choose whether or not they want to go back. Painfully obvious.
Yeah. And the whole time I just kept thinking, what are they ultimately trying to say? That men can't survive without women, but women can survive without men? And are they trying to make a feminist point, or are they trying to, like, what, is it just writing for the sake of writing, or is there, like, a point that they're trying to make?
I don't know.
Am I overthinking it?
Like, the whole men devolve into chaos and yappity yappity yap is a bit of BS.
Yeah.
Like, yes, some of the men went rather extreme. However, a lot of the extremes were focused on getting to Evie and trying to figure out how to get the women back.
Yeah.
It wasn't as though, oh dear, we don't know how to do laundry. All right, burn the clothes.
No.
Like,
that's true.
Yeah, there was a bit of chaos, but it wasn't, for the most part, because of now we have to exist without women. It was because we were trying to get the women back.
Yeah.
And as for the women, they can say what they want about, oh, it was a better society, and we didn't have any arguments, and, it was, everybody agreed, and there was less predators, and yappity yappity yap. Sorry, I'm calling BS on that. Women are just as capable of horrific things as men.
Yeah.
Sometimes even more so, because we've got the patience to plan a bit. I don't want to go, yay, equality, serial killers. But the reality is, you can't go, well, if we just got rid of all the men, society would be perfect. Because it's not.
No.
And I don't think that they were... Yes, for the first bit, they got along, and they worked together. But their circumstances dictated that. They had to.
Yeah.
And in order to survive, they had to get together.
Yeah.
The issues tend to come either in the beginning, where it's fighting for the leader of the pack and that kind of thing, which was already established because the women all came over from the same town, where there was already some predefined leadership.
Yes.
Or later, when we can focus on things that aren't just, let's stay alive today. So I argue they did not have long enough in our place to actually determine whether or not a society without men was preferable.
Yeah, that's true. And also, they all came from the same town. So obviously everybody knew who the sheriff was.
Yeah.
And they looked to her as a leader because that was her position in the community. That makes sense. Yeah.
Generally, there's the arguments and the fights as a hierarchy is established.
Right.
Because say what you want about any society, there's always going to be a hierarchy of some point.
Yeah, somebody has to be in control, whether you want that to be true or not.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I see what you're saying there. And that is, I didn't think about it that way. I just was like, oh, well... Because I think what they were trying to say is, look at how well the women can do without the men, but look how the men can't do anything without the women, except fight. I
don't know. I understand that the point that they were trying to make, I just don't think they did a very good job of making it. Because, too, like, the men, 90% of the chaos was to try and get the women back. But women that were still awake didn't seem to do a whole lot to help get everybody else back. No. Now, I understand. You're living on borrowed time.
Yeah.
It's how long can you stay awake, and or how much cocaine do you have to help you in that process?
How much cocaine can your body tolerate?
Exactly. And also, I'm sorry, Michaela did how much cocaine and how much ecstasy? And we're not addressing the fact that has some health ramifications, and that it's very easy to OD, have a heart attack, stroke out. Like, that's not even mentioned. They're just like, woohoo, cocaine!
Yeah, and then it doesn't appear like she suffers any long-term effects from that either. And so it's like, okay, well, sure. Do all these drugs and don't become an addict. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would like to know how that's possible.
Yeah.
But I was a little disappointed in this book because I wanted to like it more.
I wanted to like it more. I was quite intrigued by the summary of the back of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm like, oh, okay, sweet, that has potential. It's a well-known author, so I assume he's going to do it justice. No. Like,
yeah.
It's not bad. I just feel like it could have done better with a little bit of editing and a little bit of rewriting.
Yeah, I agree. Like,
and removal of a few characters.
Yes.
Because there's some that didn't even matter.
No, it's true. And I just, like, why are
you here?
Yeah, it's too much. There's just too much going on in this book that...
Rather than really fleshing out a couple of specific characters, it was just, like, 10 characters, everybody with, like, a very one-dimensional background.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not what I was expecting. I'm going to see if I can find... There was a quote that I read. Let's see if I can find it. This one I marked because the woman woke up and went, like, they got really violent. And one of the idiot men said, "It's like the ultimate PMS, am I right?" And I was like, are you kidding me?
No.
Seriously? Like, that's what you think of when a woman gets real violent?
Like, maybe we're getting violent because you're a not good human person.
Yeah.
Like, there's plenty of reasons for women to get violent.
Yeah.
Without going to, well, it's that time of the month.
I know. I hate that everything is blamed on that.
It's like, seriously? If that was the case, just wave a chocolate bar in front of her face and she'll be fine. If she's still mad after the chocolate, it's because of something else.
Yeah.
But I always recommend chocolate as the first option.
There was... Okay, so this part here, they were talking... There was a doctor... Oh, there was not a doctor, but a doctor was saying that the only way to stop the spread is to burn the cocoons and the sleeping women inside, and you must do this immediately. And so people started burning the women because they thought if they did that, then it would stop affecting the women. And it was just, even though this man wasn't really a doctor who had said this, and so they started, like, quickly posting rebuttals online, and the CDC started debunking it pretty quick. Yeah. This hoax still became a lead story, and people, like, he said the horse was out of the barn, and so they just started doing these mass burnings of all these women in these cocoons, which to me, seemed really interesting when you think about what's been happening in the world the last couple of years with COVID. Like, so much misinformation and people just, like, taking that one fact and running with it, and like, and how much chaos some of that created as well, right? And it just was like, I don't know, just that part just really struck me as a...
That's the thing that kind of intrigued me the most about this book, is the parallels between the Aurora Curse. The Aurora Curse is what they called it?
Yeah.
And the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, before the pandemic, I probably would have been a little bit more skeptical about some of the stuff in the book. Like, people just, latching onto a fact and running with it and going, "Oh, well, I'm sorry, mother, you were asleep, but..."
Yeah, or let's go to the extremes to protect what we think needs protecting.
Exactly. But having lived through COVID, there's a lot of, like, yep, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Well, not right, but, like, that sounds accurate.
Well, I hate to talk about COVID or anything related to COVID at this point. To me, it was like, how did he know that was going to happen in the world? This book was published, I think, in 2017. 2017. So 3 years.
Thing is, COVID is not the first pandemic.
No, I guess that's true.
There's pandemics throughout history, and humans aren't so great with dealing with them.
No, that's true. I guess I've never lived through one, so it was like, this is wild that, like, it is spot on, a lot of the stuff, and it's just, yeah.
Thing is, there's a lot of parallels with COVID, too, in that how quickly it came on. Because COVID, I mean, for some is a lot slower, but within, a couple of hours of the first case being discovered in Manitoba, schools were shut down. Like, just full lockdown of everything. Well, and everything just happened so quickly. And with this, I mean, it happened for us. I'm like, if you could stay awake.
Yeah, that's true. But, like, it started in the morning of one day. And then just by the end of the day, almost all the women were asleep.
Yeah.
I mean, COVID we knew was coming. Or we knew it was out there. I think Canada was probably one of the last places.
We're close to last, yeah.
That were really affected by it. And I think at the beginning I was like, oh, it's not going to come here. We're going to be fine.
Really?
I was totally
you're so much
in denial.
More positive than I am.
Oh, no, I'm not positive. I'm naive.
Okay.
I think is really what it comes down to. But yeah, then it started happening. And then it was like the fear, right? At first, because you just didn't know. And
well, there's so much information out there. And what's right, what's wrong,
Yeah.
and when the CDC and the authorities don't even know.
Yeah, and they're not agreeing on things either.
Exactly.
And so it's like I could see, and you could see what it did to the society and how people like were pitted against each other. And I think we felt that a lot in this area, especially.
Yeah.
But so it's easy to see how this could happen, especially when you leave the men to their own devices, because men are idiots. And well, with the last book we discussed, I said not all men are pigs. In this book, most of the men were pigs.
It seemed a higher percentage, yes.
There was a lot of them that were idiots. I'm not usually one to hate on men, but in this book, ugh.
They weren't exactly given a super nice portrayal.
No, they really weren't. Like, they weren't really kind to their own gender, the kings.
Well, it's one of those things where I'm kind of going, give it a grain or two of salt.
Yeah.
Because they are panicking, and the decisions made while panicking are not exactly the greatest in the world. So they are dealing with a situation that is unlike anything they've ever seen before.
Yeah.
And happening to all of their loved ones. I can understand why they would not be making the most rational decisions.
Yeah.
However, there's a couple still where I'm going, there's a bulldozer. Use it.
You don't need a bazooka.
That's the thing, too, where I'm like, all of a sudden we've got bazookas? I mean, I know this is America, but really?
Yes.
Like, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, we got some C4 and a bazooka, and we're just gonna go blow up the jail, and we're gonna blow up the prison.
We're gonna rob the sheriff's office of all their guns.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of guns in this book.
A lot of guns. It's America. When they killed off the doctor, we were like, what? It's just so random.
Like the meth head doctor?
The meth head doctor. I was just like, just push him out of the back of the bus and we're fine.
Yeah, I know.
Like, he was a fairly involved character, and him and Michaela were kind of getting along. Well, getting along in that they were both doing cocaine together, and him because he wanted to, not because he had to.
Yeah.
That was just buddies, yes.
Baseline.
Yes. And then they're just like, whoop, out of the back of the bus.
Yeah.
Bye.
But he was also another character who could have stayed out of the story, really.
It's one where I felt like he's more of an excuse character. Yeah. He kept popping up, but you're kind of like, you're not here for any particular reason, you're just kind of here. But he was also one where I'm like, okay, you could have gone somewhere, because it sort of, I don't know, there was sort of an attempt at kind of a redemption arc kind of a thing.
Yeah, and they didn't...
But then they pushed him in the back of a bus.
Well,
it's like, Owen went, hey, we could do this with it, and Stephen's going, no!
I mean, I did like his character, to be honest.
I did too.
I thought he was kind of funny. At first I was like, this guy's an idiot, but by the end I was like, oh yeah, I do like this guy, he's funny.
At first I was confused. It was
kind of sad that he was the one that they killed off.
He was one of the few characters where I'm kind of like, I want to see where this goes.
Mm-hmm. Partially
because we first meet him in the bathroom of a trailer of a couple of meth head cookers.
Yeah.
Meth head cookers. Meth cookers. Meth heads and meth cookers? I don't know.
I think this probably...
How many drug references can we get in one podcast?
Well, but it was like a part of the story.
It was like a trailer, and it's like crime and murder and prostitution.
That was probably,
and
if we're being totally honest, the most exciting part of the book.
It was.
When she came in there and killed those two guys, the meth cookers.
But then there's just like this doctor in the bathroom escaping out the window, and you're going, you're a doctor, why are you here? Like, it's just completely...
Hey, doctors can be meth heads too.
He was one of the better characters, I think.
Yeah, he was kind of fun. That's the thing too. Everybody was so like serious, it seemed, or like...
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I guess there was a major virus or whatever, but at the same time, it's like, I need some comic relief in this book.
Well, it kind of felt like the doctor was just kind of a scapegoat for everything. Like, oh, we need somebody that Frank can be mad at. The doctor.
Yeah.
Oh, we need somebody to get Michaela drugs so she stays awake.
The doctor.
We need somebody to accidentally push out of the back of a van because just killing off one girl isn't enough. The doctor!
We need somebody to run over the judge's cat.
Judge's cat, yep. The doctor!
Yeah.
Like, he's just kind of... If you wanted kind of a not nice but not crime done, you just go to the doctor.
Go to the doctor. Yes.
I don't know. It was an interesting book.
Yeah.
It is not even close to the favorite book I've ever read in the world, and you think I need to read a different Stephen King just to see what Stephen King by himself does, because I wasn't impressed with this.
And one that's more horror-y, I feel like this one was not horror at all.
I know, I might be bloodthirsty, but I'm kind of going like, Stephen King, this is tame.
Well, but then if you read the author's note at the back,
it was supposed to be fantasy, yeah.
If a fantasy novel is to be believable, the details must be realistic. So they considered it fantasy, not horror. I don't know that I would consider it fantasy, but...
I don't know. Like, it's fantasy in that it's a magical tree with a mortal woman and a talking fox.
Does the fox talk?
I don't know if he talks.
I don't think he does. A lot. He communicates.
A communicating fox.
I don't think he actually speaks words.
No, I'm thinking of The Green Knight. What an awful movie that was. It's fantasy in that regard.
Yeah. Like, there's an alternate world.
Yeah.
I guess. Which is really the same world, but different.
But with a magic tree.
The magic tree. Although some of them see the magic tree in the real world, too. Mm-hmm. So... yeah, but it kind of goes away. It's not the fanciest fantasy book that I've ever read either.
No, definitely not.
And definitely not the most scary book. There were things that I thought were gross, but... even that... well, I think we've established that your tolerance for grossness is a lot higher than mine. So...
I don't know. It's... honestly, my final thoughts of this book are, should you read it? Yeah, it's a good book. But you should not read it expecting a horror book.
No.
And you should probably photocopy the first couple pages so that you can always keep track and reference who's who.
I put a sticky on there so I could refer back if I needed to.
Yeah. You'll be fine first half. Second half, all hope is lost.
And also keep in mind that it's really long.
Oh, yes.
So
very long.
Yeah.
And I was annoyed with how it ended.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Lila and the therapist, psychiatrist, husband,
Dr. Norcross.
Dr. Norcross, yes. They never really resolved anything.
No.
They're just like, here's a baby, we're gonna keep it, and he turns out I don't like you quite so much, and... yeah. But we're gonna keep living together.
And he's like, do I get a choice in the baby? And she says no. And it was because she didn't get it. He put in a pool without asking her.
Yeah, because a child and a pool are comparable.
Yeah. He gets a pool, I get a baby. I mean, at this point in my life, I would take the pool, to be honest. But I also have 2 kids, so I don't really need another.
Exactly. Like, it's just kind of ended.
Yeah.
And
they did sort of summarize, or like...
they summarized every character. I feel like everybody else they did okay on.
Yeah, but there was...
but with those 2, I'm just like, am I missing a page here?
There was so much summarizing at the end of, like, this happened to this person, and this person did this, and this, like, there was just a lot of that. Because there was so many characters.
On the one hand, I'm like, yeah, good. I don't want to just end with, and they came out to the tree, and everybody lived happily ever after.
No.
Because the reality is...
they're not going to listen.
Some of these people committed murder. Some of these people had to watch their loved ones die. Mm-hmm. Some of the women come back to find out they've accidentally murdered their loved ones.
The warden at the prison told all the criminals to run away.
Exactly. None of them did. But...
one did.
Oh, right, one did.
Angel.
Angel, yes. She never fell asleep.
She never fell asleep.
Mm-mm. I don't think she ever actually went to the other side of the tree, did she? I thought she kind of just hung around killing guys.
She may have gone at the end when they went.
I forget. I was asleep by that point. But anyway, I forget where I was going with this.
The not happily ever after.
Right, yes. Like, they dealt with some of the consequences.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And I appreciated that because one of the women that was so happy to leave, one of the first ones to go, yeah, we should go back, had actually killed her son when he tried to take the cocoon off her face. He was one of the first victims? Casualties? Well, he's casualties.
Yeah.
And to come back and find out that you murdered your own son.
Yeah.
That's a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
And how those characters kind of dealt with things, I found quite interesting. I think the rest, like everybody else, they kind of did a good job, but with not the 2 main characters, because they weren't really the main characters, but the ones who got a little bit more screen time, as it were. They just kind of like, I have a baby, you have a pool, I don't like you, you don't like me, we're not going to get a divorce, but... yeah. Yep.
But from when their son...
yeah, but he said that they were...
he said they were getting a divorce.
But then they continue on with the actual couple, and they're like, yeah, well, now we have a baby, so...
yeah. So that part to me, I was a little bit confused.
Yeah.
So maybe he just thought they were getting a divorce.
I did feel bad for the son.
Yeah. Like, that poor guy.
The girl that he was, rescuing people... rescuing? That's... rescuing?
Rescuing. That's right.
The girl that he was rescuing people with just goes on and dates somebody else and see ya.
Yeah.
And I just kind of felt bad for him, because it's like, oh, sorry.
I know. He pined after her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the whole book.
Yeah.
All 700 pages of it. And then he didn't even get the girl in the
And then he
end.
didn't even get the girl in the end.
Oh,
No.
I know. That's sad. But, yeah, is it the best book I've ever read? No.
No.
Not even close to the top.
Is it a good book? Yeah.
It's not.
But
I
I think you have to go in not expecting a typical Stephen King horror book.
Yeah. I feel like we should take the horror sticker off the spine on this book.
Yes, we are going to.
I don't know. Do you have any other final thoughts?
No, that's about it. Read the book, but you can read it with the lights off in the middle of the night and you'll be fine.
Yes.
You'll fall asleep. You'll probably have a great night's sleep. You'll be fine.
And this book will make you want to fall asleep because there are so many sleeping characters.
And they're like just drifting off and going, that sounds wonderful.
Doesn't it sound glorious? And
That's
just
the
to
thing.
like sleep without having to wake up.
That's called death, Janine.
No, not in this book. I mean, they woke up in the end, but
it
like...
just sounds like the way that they depict it. It's just like, just so restful and drifting off. And I'm like, oh, that sounds glorious.
Yeah, they just drift off. And they're in their cocoons and oblivious to what's going on in the world.
I'm just gonna hang out.
Yeah, hang out in my cocoon.
We're jealous of characters in a horror book.
Sad.
Oh. Did you want to do some of the effects here?
Sure. So, we didn't talk really about the authors last time, did we?
I don't think we did.
So, Stephen King has been described as the king of horror, which is a play on his name.
Hilarious.
Yes. He's published 64 novels, which is a lot, including 7 under the pen name of Richard Bachman. And his novels have sold over 350 million copies. So, that's a few things about Stephen King. Owen King, who is Stephen King's son, has written a book of short stories.
He is the son of the king of horror.
Yeah.
The prince of horror.
The Prince of Horror.
Prince of darkness.
He's also written a novel. And in 2020, he became producer of the CBS All Access miniseries adaptation of his father's novel, The Stand. He also co-wrote a new ending with his father exclusively for the miniseries. There's really not a lot of information about Owen King online, so that's kind of boring information. But
I just like that
that's what was there.
Co-wrote a new ending for the miniseries, because I've just got the mental image now of him. And it was like, your typical teenager, where it's like, Dad, I really like what you wrote, but it sucks. Yeah. So we're going to change it.
So, a couple of things I found out about Stephen King while I was doing a bit of research that I thought were interesting. The book Carrie was Stephen King's 4th novel, but it was his first one that was published. When it was chosen for publication, his phone was out of service, so the editor at Doubleday sent him a telegram to let him know that the book was being published, which I thought was really funny.
You just don't get telegrams anymore.
No. I mean, this was years and years ago, but he received a $2,500 advance for the book, which he used to purchase a Ford Pinto, which is not even a car they make anymore. Stephen King's also written a book about writing. I think it's actually called On Writing. And I just thought this was really interesting. So he has a formula for learning to write well, which is read and write 4 to 6 hours a day. If you cannot find the time for that, you can't expect to become a good writer. He sets out each day with a quota of 2,000 words and will not stop writing until it is met. He also has a simple definition for talent in writing. If you wrote something for which someone sent you a check, if you cashed the check and it didn't bounce, and if you then paid the light bill with the money, I consider you talented.
Okay.
Yep. That's what he said.
I feel like he could have probably edited down the quota of 2,000 words a day with this particular book.
Well, I mean, he could still write 2,000 words a day, but...
Okay, his editor should be removing some of the words.
Just less words in the book. Mm-hmm. He can write as many words a day as he wants, but... Yeah. So, those were some things that I thought were kind of interesting. That was our first foray into the world of Stephen King.
Yes.
Not as successful as we had hoped, but maybe if you've listened to us long enough, we'll have another one down the road.
Put it this way. The James Patterson book that I read made me never want to read another James Patterson book again as long as I live. The Stephen King book made me want to read a book just by Stephen King to see whether or not it was good. But with that, anything else, Janine?
No, I think that's all I've got.
Alright, we'll see you next time, and hopefully it's a really, really, really good book that we don't have any complaints about, and it'll be the shortest, most boring podcast in the history of podcasts. And with that, bye!
Bye!